I was 16, and people who weren't around at that time did not understand perhaps what the pressures were on people to volunteer, because not that it was any pressure on me as a schoolboy, but I pressured my father. I couldn't get in the Army, Navy or Air Force because you had to be 18. Anyhow, I met him one day in Sydney and he gave me a piece of paper and he said, go to this firm, and I went to the firm and gave the man a piece of paper, and he said to me, why do you want to go to sea? And being articulate and educated, I said, I don't know. And anyhow, he went away and made a phone call and came back and gave me a piece of paper again. He said, go to the ship. And I found my way to a ship, Sydney Harbour, knocked on a door, and a big, tall Norwegian gentleman came out and said, what do you want? So I handed him my piece of paper. He said, why do you want to go to sea? You can guess what I said. I don't know. So he talked to me for about a minute and he said, come back tomorrow morning with your gear. And that was it. A couple of days later we sailed out of Sydney Harbour, head for the Atlantic. Rather foolish thing to do when you come to think of it. But there's different circumstances. Just about everybody who could go went. There was no compulsion, no conscription, it was all volunteers. And my cousins had gone, my brother was overseas in the Air Force. And I haven't quite worked out why I did it. It wasn't any sense of trying to win the war. It was just that it was the thing to do. If you couldn't get in the Air Forces, you'd do what you can. I don't know why. I really don't understand. It was a stupid thing to do. Left my mother by herself, actually. I was made a deck boy, which was a job there that required you to be part of the deck crew. Only about 10 of us, and the training consisted of being taken up onto the bridge and showed the steering wheel and point out the compass and steer the ship. And but you did 3 watches a day, 4-hour watches. If you started at midday, you went till 4 p.m. and then midnight till 4 a.m. And you did that 7 days a week, And when you're up on the bridge or the ship, you had 2 hours steering the ship and 2 hours out on the wings on lookout, because we had no lights, there was no radar or anything like that. And that was my job at sea. And subsequently, through the effluxion of time rather than skill, I became an ordinary seaman, and then later on, subsequently, AB they called it, able-bodied seaman. That was the peak of my shipping career. I was on a Norwegian tanker, and that ship had been built in Germany in 1938, and it was a pretty nice ship. I think there was only 2 to us a cabin. We had a fairly comfortable life, there's no question about that. There was never a hardship. The Norwegians didn't have enough crew, you see, because a lot of their ships had sunk and they lost a lot of seamen, and they recruited Australians wherever they could to get the crew. They were pretty good. They didn't like speaking English much, but I had to learn Norwegian. I was never up in what they call convoys. I've made that crystal clear. When you go through the Panama Canal, you really come into the Caribbean Sea, which is part of the Atlantic Ocean. And that was, for a time, a very, very dangerous area, because I don't know how it was, but they attacked a lot of ships there. And we went through the canal and we went south to a place called Aruba, where there was oil, and we were picking up oil. And we were bringing it back to New Zealand, back to Australia, and we went up the Persian Gulf, up to right up into the Gulf, into Iraq and Iran, as they were called the Mesopotamia and Persia in those days. Took a load of oil down to South Africa and went into the Atlantic down there. But The ship I was on did not go up into the North Atlantic where the convoys were, and to that extent it was probably less dangerous waters than some of our people here went into. You know, they were many hundreds of ships sunk, many thousands of seamen, navy and merchant navy lost, many lost up there, but they never got us. The Japanese would have loved to have got us, but they missed. Once they fired a torpedo at our ship, but they missed. Yeah, you had to learn how to, a 20mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft cannon, and they showed you how to load it once, and I was, the Norwegian called it ammunition slanger. That was the fellow who put the rounds into the 50 container magazine. And as I said earlier, after one or two trips, I can't remember when, the gunner got sick and was put ashore in Panama Canal, so they promoted me. And I always remember the radio operator coming into the mess and putting up a typewritten notice on the deck of the bulkhead, which was the wall, you know. And he said, deck boy Kennedy is Cannon Commander Kennedy. I'd risen to the great heights of being a cannon commander. And that was about the peak of my gunning career. Well, I came back in July 46. It was strange, really. We got off a plane at Mascot, and I don't remember going through custom or immigration or anything. I just went home and lived at Manly. And I think I was a bit of a loose end anyhow. I didn't have any great academic qualifications or anything, and the government did not supply anything for merchant navy people at that time, you know. So I went back to sea. I spent another 4 or 5 years at sea on ships, mainly around Australia, over to Fiji and New Zealand and around Australian ports. And then accidentally again I left the sea because in 1949 Australia was gripped by a coal miners' strike. And this last ship I was on was what we call a coal burner. It used to burn coal, and they don't have that these days. And that ship could not get fuel. It happened to be in Sydney, so we had to lay it up, and I remember climbing up the funnel and putting a tarpaulin over the funnel and went home, and never went back to sea. I always remember we were in Balikpapan Harbour in Borneo when just after the war ended, and the captain of our ship had heard that we were taken up to Shanghai and give to the Chinese government, because it was a pretty old ship. So he arranged for 60 Japanese soldiers to come on the ship with guards. And here was me, a 17-year-old or 18-year-old, I forget what it was. I had 10 Japanese prisoners under my care to work on the ship to clean it up, because old ships get rusty. And I had to put them to work, give them chipping hammers and scrapers and things. And I was telling somebody the other day that we rigged up what we call a stage over the side of the ship where they had to sit on a plank and go to the side of the ship. And some of them had a habit of dropping the hammers in the water. So the next day I had one of the soldiers, the Japanese soldiers, spoke a bit of English. And I said to him, we're losing a lot of hammers over the side. And there was an Australian soldier there sitting there with Owen gun guarding them. And I said to him, would you tell the rest of your men here that if any more hammers go over the side, Nippon goes in after them. I never lost any hammers after that. Psychology. I wouldn't have put them in the water, but still. But that was the war was over. War was over. And went to Philippines and then up to Shanghai, as I said. So that was the end of the war. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.